by the 9 and 4. Welcome to the library. Today we'll be starting to take a look at the various divine personages that make up the pantheons of the realms, current and past. These divine discussions will help delay the understandings needed for our further explorations and will cover several entries. As always, please keep in mind that this is just an introduction to these august and storied individuals, many of whom will be explored in further entries. With that said, let us begin this exploration of the divine with a bit of background, as the early history of the divine is a matter of debate and discussion. The origins of the collective of divine beings that came into existence in the first days, long before the wars of feather and scale, is unclear to modern scholars. With the death of the majority of them during the Wars of the Spark, and the massive destruction that occurred during that conflict, information on their origins is sparse and fragmentary, and when collated, often contradictory. What is known for sure is that in the early days of the realms, there were two castes of divine beings, the powerful ethereals and the lesser yet far more numerous material deities. It is assumed, yet not confirmed, that the mysterious Nine Wings was involved in the creation of these beings. Others postulate that there is an unknown or lost caste of gods that are in fact responsible for the creation of the material and ethereal deities. The truth of the matter is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon without the intervention of the elder races, either the dragons or the NLR, as they are the only races with still living members that were around in those days. Neither of them seems willing to impart this lost knowledge. Their origins aside, the ethereal material gods ruled over their domains for the majority of the realm's history. Their relative inaction during the reign of Vanson has brought them much derision. However, it seems that Vanson's corrupting influence was able to even erode the links between Jamamar and her gods. So they did as they could for their charges in that time of great evil and chaos. Starting with the most powerful and the fewer ethereal deities, we begin with Logos, the god of the afterlife and the dead. Logos is master of both dead and the undead. It is his duty to direct the souls of the dead to the planes they shall go to. The master of death is also a god of sleep, when souls drift close to those other planes. Next, there is Leah, goddess of fire and destruction. Leah is the wife or sister of Logos, depending on lore. She is the indomitable spirit of flame and destruction. She is flighty and tempestuous. Despite her own nature, she is aware that destruction does bring about rebirth. Next to them we find Dogos, god of sky and air, master of the winds and also a god of storms. Dogos is arrogant but has a strong sense of fair play, honor, and equity. He disdains the power of all other deities. Next we have his wife, Dia, the goddess of earth and creation. Wife to Dogos, she is a good-natured and motherly individual that befits her profile. She respects all living things as having a right to their existence. A proponent of life and beauty in all things, she is often considered a goddess of love as well. She and Leah have some intertwining responsibilities, as destruction does bring about rebirth. Wrapping up the ethereal gods, we have Sandrine, the goddess of sea and rivers, the most capricious and mercurial of all of her brothers and sisters. Her wild nature accounts for the tsunamis and storms that plague sailors, coastal towns, and villages. She is also the patron of all sea-dwelling creatures. With the titans that are the ethereal gods covered, we next have their aids, the material gods, of which we will only cover the most potent and powerful, as there were many divine spirits set toward various small domains such as a river or a crossing. Most of these were thought lost during Vanson's reign, the Wars of the Spark, or never rose to the notice of other divine beings or that of history. That aside, let us start with Mizral, god of the sun and day, patron to the elves, first among the material gods, their leader and sovereign. He is also the divine ancestor of the elven race through his son Daystar. Mizral is married to Nodel, goddess of the moon. As god of the day, Mizral wields the life-giving power of the sun and commands the worship of many different species and walks of life. He is known as a good and a kind god, but sad and contemplative as well. His wife Nodel, goddess of the moon and night, also patron to the elves. She was once a gentle and compassionate goddess. She was the gentle night sky, resplendent in her beauty and gracious in her favor, queen of her court. This all changed when Dogos stole her precious son Daystar. She became dark, despondent, full of despair and woe. Where once she was kind, she was now cold and cruel. She locked herself away from all but her cherished clerics and the elves, the legacy of her son. We next have Samus, god of weaponry, combat, and volcanoes, patron to the Dwarves. Samus was said to have been gifted with the God Forge by the Nine Wings, who felt of all the divine children, Samus was most deserving. He created the hardy and honorable dwarves to be his assistants in the forge. A stern perfectionist who crafts weapons for the gods, often quiet and contemplative, he mourns the use of his weapons, which to him are more art than craft. He was given the material to make god-killing weapons, and forged a hammer of that material to protect the forge of the gods. His love for his wife Lono runs very deep, despite being baffled by her creative nature. Lono, as mentioned, is the wife of Samus, goddess of inspiration, music, and art, patron to the gnomes. Kindly goddess, quick to smile and laugh, with a quick mind and a very sharp wit. Often intrigued by complicated architecture, design, artwork, and mathematics, she has created many things of extraordinary origin within her husband's forge, using the hammer he created almost as well as her husband. This is how she created the gnomes. Sheila, goddess of travel, exploration, and stealth, patron to the halflings. She is the sister of Lono and Samus, and by her nature had a desire to explore all of Jamamar, every valley and mountain pass. She had a desire to not travel alone, so she begged her brother Samus to create traveling companions filled with the same wanderlust that she possessed. Thus were the halflings born. Next we have nature deities, first of which is Lash, the god of nature. Like his sister Kim, is often distant as a deity, as they both embody the passion of the storm, the anguish of birth, the peace of a verdant spring glade, and the joy and bloom of youth. Lash and Kim concentrate on keeping a balance in the natural world, as well as passionately battling unnatural beings. Lash is seen as more kindly than Kim, with a kinder, gentler nature and more restraint in approaching problem solving. His sister, Kim, the goddess of nature, is always aloof and never deigns to mingle with mortals or seek their worship. She is revered nonetheless as a distant mother goddess by many, a personification of the violent things in nature far more than her brother. She is known to have struck down those who offended her too greatly. Next, we move on to Isalay, the goddess of magic. Isalay was one of the most beautiful goddesses, and while she was overwhelmingly powerful and gifted in the arts of magic, she began as a goddess of love. Soon, she became the mistress of magic. She guarded her secrets and power jealously and decided that only her own forced hermitage and withdrawal from the other gods would keep those secrets safe. From the subtleties of the arcane to the bluntness of the battlefield, our next god is Malice, Goddess of War and Spite. Malice is a base and evil goddess, spite boiling over at all times. She despises the gods that were able to create their own race, as she seems unable to do this. She turns her attentions instead to poisons, assassinations, and all arts of subterfuge. She enjoys sowing discord and derision. From war to its common cause, we have Trium, the god of wealth, greed, and debt. A god who has immense respect from his peers. He's served by many evil dragons and others that have hordes that far exceed their fellows. He keeps to himself, reclusive and paranoid. And for our final god, and wrapping up, we have the child of Trium and Malice, Woe, the god of trickery. Woe has been the bane and thorn in the side of some of the most powerful gods in existence. His jokes and tricks are always mean-spirited and cruel, as he is more entertained by pain and suffering than any of the other gods. One might say that this introduction is woefully short and overly truncated. However, as only 2, perhaps as many as 4 of these beings have existed to this day, the rest of them having fallen during the Wars of the Spark, when they thought to bring to heel the forces of the mortal gods. This will have to serve for the time being. However, for completeness, the survivors of the Wars of the Spark include Miseril and Nodell, given sanctuary by Her Majesty Genevieve, were spared during the conflict. Shayla, however, is another matter, as no records exist mentioning her from after the Wars of Feather and Scale. The halflings, her people, still say to this day she left to explore, her eternal wanderlust carrying her far afield long before the elder races began their conflict, and she will return when she has finally grown bored of her travels. Woe, on the other hand, is thought to have fled at the onset of the Wars of the Spark. The truth of this is uncertain, as perhaps befits the god of trickery. Now that we have covered the old gods, we will begin to cover the mortal gods, their children, and far more in the next episode of Divine Discussions, part of the Intro to the Realm series. As always, thank you for your time and attention. I will see you on your next visit to the library. By the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourself and each other.